So one of my recent haul videos featured pretty heavily a selection of the Expanded Universe line of Star Wars Power of the Force 2 figures. And after I finished filming that video, I realized, you know what, I don't want to keep these in package. I actually wanted to pop them out and take a look. And I started with this guy, the Imperial Sentinel, because I really dig his design. I think he looks really cool. And I figured, let's, pump the brakes there. And I figured, let's open them and we can do a video on them. So I'm going to open up pretty much that entire wave. I don't have all of them accessible to do that. And we're going to do the figures that I got recently in the most recent haul video with Thrawn and the Shadows of the Empire. I figured it'd be something different, not necessarily a review, but I'm going to crack open a selection of figures that at this point are 20 plus years old and just talk about them, take a look at them, and see what they all had to offer. And that's it. So let's get to it. Let's crack some figures open. All right, so here's the selection of toys we've got to work with today. We've got the Imperial Sentinel is already out, obviously, but there is something to show because there's a big thing, quote-unquote thing, with the Expanded Universe figures that makes them special. And then we've got 4 of the Shadows of the Empire, and there are 6 Expanded Universe, so there's 10 to open. I'm not actually going to open them on camera because the noise is just incredibly annoying, for at least from my perspective, to hear on camera. So I'm going to open them off camera and then we'll kind of fade in and out between figures. But just rest assured, they are all going to be opened. These are not ones that I'm just pretending to open and showing you an already loose figure. So I'm going to move all this stuff out of the way. We're going to talk about the Imperial Sentinel first and what he comes with, and then we will do the rest of these guys. All right, so here's our Sentinel, and this guy in particular is my favorite of all of the Expanded Universe figures, even more so than Thrawn, just because of what he kind of represents, and he is a really, really cool figure and a cool design. So this guy was originally going to be kind of the big bad when Kenner made a suggestion to Lucas that they create the next story after Return of the Jedi, after the figures and the toy line was done. This was going to be the big bad from their perspective if Lucas let them go ahead with their story that they were going to tell with toys. Obviously that never happened, but this guy got integrated into comics later on and he becomes the Imperial Sentinel. So that said, they made a figure out of him, and these figures all come with these kind of explodable card backs that allow you to build up a little diorama, and they all have kind of comic book art inside. This guy is, I don't know what this is supposed to be, some sort of a space station type backdrop. It looks kind of cool. I really dig these. I think it was a fun idea. It's the kind of thing that I think toys should still do today, but, what are you going to do? As far as the figure itself goes, he is, again, my favorite of the bunch. He's not a whole lot in terms of, articulation, but he is a really cool design. The weapon he has is actually interesting in the fact that you're supposed to display it this way, but the base of it is curved to allow him to stand straight up, and it sits perfectly on the ground. And it's a stupid thing, but it's ingeniously designed. The back of the helmet is clear, so you can see through, and it lets light shine through the eyes. It probably doesn't come up too well on camera, but the little eyes are just little pinholes, and the light from the back of the helmet shines through to give them kind of a light up eye look. But the majority of the figure is just a big blob of plastic with movable arms. Nothing else moves on him. But I think he's really cool. So, there's the figure. And then, here's the card back, and it's got these little ports on them. You just pop them through, and then you can cut out the back, and you've got your little diorama. Which, again, may not be much, but I think it's really, really cool. And this is why I really wanted to open these guys. So we're going to take a break from these because I think they're the best of the bunch. We're going to open up the Shadows of the Empire real quick and take a look at those, and then we'll move on to these other Expanded Universe guys. All right, so here's the Shadows of the Empire figures out of the package, and for the most part, they're pretty basic. I still loved these figures when I was a kid, specifically Luke, and I still do. I think he looks really cool in this Imperial Guard disguise, no matter how odd it is in terms of those guards. One weird theme against all of them, though, except for Dash, is Chewie has a cape, Bosch has a cape, well, Leia, and Luke has a cape. Dash Rendar instead gets this goofy little weapon pack that sits on his back. It pegs into his back, very reminiscent of what Hasbro has been doing for the past couple years with giving figures big weapons racks that sits on their bodies. For the most part, they're also relatively unstable. Luke is, again, fine. I like pretty much everything about this figure. Dash Rendar is just standing on a razor's edge right now. I'm surprised he hasn't fallen over yet. He probably will. They all have kind of bent knees. As you can see, in particular, Bosch and Dash Rendar have bent knees, so they kind of stand weird. She's also got a sculpted thermal detonator in her hand. Chewie is the worst. I mean, I can't even get him to stand flat-footed. He's got his one foot kind of hovering in the air. His weapons are also very, very gummy. The plastic has not fared well these past 20-some years. But he looks okay. He's a different and unique Chewie, so I can appreciate that. I always dig Leia in the Bosch disguise. The Dash Rendar figure is probably the weakest of the bunch, despite the fact that he's really integral to Shadows of the Empire in general. He's just not a very exciting figure because, you know, he doesn't correspond to anybody that we really know, and he gets this very generic-looking figure. But Luke is always going to be the standout for me, and he still is. So we're going to move all these guys aside. We'll put them in the background maybe, and let's start cracking open these Expanded Universe figures. All right, so first up on the Expanded Universe side, we have got the Clone Emperor. So if you aren't familiar with the original post-Return of the Jedi stuff in the comics and in the books, there was a series of Emperor clones, and this is one of them. He doesn't really look like the Emperor that we know. He has a blue lightsaber. This figure also has a swivel wrist, which is, you know, interesting for this series. I'm not even sure I knew he had that until I opened this figure. And then he comes with this backdrop, which I don't really know what this is supposed to be. It's obviously a space scene. I'm assuming it's supposed to be the planet Biss, because that's a big thing for Palpatine and his seat of power. But I like it. Again, I really dig this idea for card backs and what to do with them for kids. And I think it's a cool way to, you know, display your figures. I have never opened any of these until now, so this is fun to actually crack these open for me and to see what they look like. I like the art style. I like the comic book style artwork that we've got going on here. So yeah, not a whole lot to talk about, really. Standard figure, but he looks pretty cool. It's definitely a different figure from what we're used to. Different look. Blue lightsaber, Clone Emperor Palpatine. All right, next up we have got kind of a fan favorite character, I think, anyway. Kyle Katarn from some Star Wars video games, most notably here, the Dark Forces game. And he's kind of the most boring of the bunch, I think, just in terms of design. He's just kind of a standard guy. He's got two guns, standard 5 POA stuff, really. His backdrop is obviously an Imperial shuttle, kind of the landing platform coming out. It's cool. It's got some protruding parts here, and then the kind of platform to walk up the ramp is protruding as well. So it's a cool one. It has a lot of depth to it. I like it. It's just different in that it's not really comic book style art. So yeah, he's probably the least favorite of the bunch just because he's so boring, but he's still a cool figure to actually have and get a representation of his character for sure. One of the more interesting figures is the Space Trooper. So this guy comes from the Heir to the Empire books. They're basically stormtroopers with unique armor that operate in space. So he has a little bit different articulation. His arms can actually swivel all the way out and then forward. He has a waist twist. He's got legs that move all the way out, but he doesn't have anything else. There's no knee joints. It looks like there are based on his sculpt, but there actually aren't. He has no accessories. He's got the little booster pack that moves, and then he's got this flange piece here that pops out. I don't know if that's supposed to be a gun or like a thruster, though. I don't really recall. He does have a cool sculpt, so he's definitely unique in that regard. And then his backdrop is space-themed, obviously. He operates in space, so he's on a ship, kind of like the back half of a ship. You can see the Falcon in the background being chased by a bunch of TIE fighters. So it creates an interesting diorama. It's definitely different from the others so far. It's still got that comic-style artwork, but this time he's not inside of something. He's out in the void of space. All right, so we're getting close to the end. We're, you know, over the halfway mark for these figures. We have got the Luke Skywalker figure from this line, from the Dark Empire comic books. This takes a different turn for Luke, where he starts to turn dark for specific reasons. There's a method to the madness here, but you can see it's kind of reflected in his clothing. He kind of looks Vader-esque. He's standing in a ship. It's kind of nondescript. There's not a whole lot to talk about with his backdrop, but there is a lot going on, a lot of different levels to this cutout, so I think it looks cool. It's just not very dynamic, really. He does have, like the Palpatine figure, he does have a swivel wrist, because he comes with a blaster rifle, and he has a swivel wrist for that hand, and then he has got a red lightsaber, which is always cool, especially when it's for a character who has historically never had one. And he's got a kind of pliable robe with a lot of sculpt work underneath for his kind of undergarments there. So yeah, I think he's a cool figure. I like this whole story. Everything about this comic series really did it for me. I still think it's cool. It's one of the better examples of some just really over-the-top and cool Star Wars stuff from the post-ROTJ era when things were kind of the Wild West for Star Wars still. So yeah, we've got the sort of dark side Luke Skywalker. So definitely the biggest figure in this bunch is the Dark Trooper from the Dark Forces game, and he not only has a unique design, he's got a humongous figure compared to the rest. He's got this huge backpack which has moving parts on him. I mean, he just looks awesome. You can't deny that he looks really cool. His backdrop is also very unique because it's basically a representation of the in-game graphics from the perspective of the player. You've got a dead stormtrooper down there, you've got the HUD, you've got a gun for that first-person perspective. So I think that's pretty cool. You can kind of put him in the backdrop there and have him be a part of the scene, a part of the game. But this guy is just awesome. They were like kind of the new big bad troopers in the game, in that lore for this time period. Kind of like the Chewbacca that I talked about previously. This guy's gun has not fared too well. It's really gummy. The plastic hasn't held up too well, I don't think, but it's not such a big deal. Unless it starts to melt, it's not going to be a huge problem. And overall, a very cool figure. All right, and last but certainly not least, especially not to me, we have got the Grand Admiral Thrawn figure, and this guy has been a favorite of mine for a long time. No way around it. He is a favorite figure, favorite character for me. One of my favorites in the entire Power of the Force 2 line. He's definitely up there for me in this little subline. Just this Sentinel figure is just too cool to not rank #1 for me out of this little subline. He comes with the Ysalamiri wrapped around his neck, so very much like what he is portrayed by in the book, in the comics, all of that. And he's just a cool figure, cool character. He's got the cool backdrop with the like the bridge of the ship with the starfield in the background. And, you know, you just can't go wrong with the Grand Admiral Thrawn figure, especially since this was the figure for the longest time. So if you wanted a Grand Admiral Thrawn, you really had to go this route. And I think he still holds up even to this day. So there you have it. There is a small selection of some old vintage, maybe not. Modern vintage might be the better way to describe them. I don't know. They're not new, certainly. You know, we're talking 20 plus years of age on these figures, so they're certainly not current or modern figures, but they're certainly not new, so I don't really know what to call them. What do you guys call these? I don't know. Vintage might be a clickbaity way of titling this video, but I don't know how else to describe them. So yeah, we've got some Power of the Force 2 figures, Shadows of the Empire, and Expanded Universe. Let me know what you guys think of these. What do you think of the backdrops? What do you think of Shadows of the Empire? What do you think of the Expanded Universe line? Did you collect these as a kid? Do you collect them now? Let me know your thoughts. And until next time.